Tēnā koutou katoa, haere mai ki tēnei hui, te iwi o rangitāne tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our extraordinary Arts, Culture and Heritage Committee meeting of the 29th of September. This meeting is being recorded and will be live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. The meeting's being run under Alert Level 2 conditions, so it's compulsory to scan in before entering the meeting room. Please do so if you've not done already, but I'm sure Council colleagues have. Social distancing is required, so everybody's required to stay at least 1 metre apart and 2 metres apart from people you don't work with. Mask wearing is required under Alert Level 2 because we're public facing, so please keep your mask on for the duration of the meeting. The health and safety procedures for this venue, the Conference and Function Centre, are shown on the display screen, and I'll let you take a moment to cast your eye over those and refamiliarise yourselves with them. For councillors online, please use the hands up function if you wish to speak and cast your vote in the chat box. Please email any text for amendments to the committee administrators. Councillors, you're announced with your name. Presenters, if you would give your name for the purposes of those watching online before you speak, that will be helpful. For those in the room, please ensure your device is on silent. So, if we move to the order of business, we'll start. So, councillors online are, and I think everybody's working, Councillor Renee Dingwall, Councillor Karen Naylor, Councillor Lou Finlay, Councillor Leonie Harpeter, Councillor Bruno Petrinas, and Deputy Mayor Rutherford. Apologies this morning I've received from Councillor Vaughan Dennison, so I will look to put that we accept those apologies, seek a seconder for that. Councillor Handcock, thank you. We're doing voting on the voices, I think, and people online can join in with that. So all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. I will get the hang of this, I promise. I have no notification of additional items. Give an opportunity. I have no late items. Opportunity for any declarations of interest, colleagues? Nothing there. And I've not been advised of any public comment, although I will recognise at this point in the room we have Joe Hollander, who chairs our Palmerston North Defence Heritage Advisory Group, here to witness proceedings but not making comment today. And with that, we will move to our item 5, the Military Heritage Update, presented by Michael Dwindham, Acting City Planning Manager. I invite you to come forward, Michael. Make whatever comments you'd like to make, and then we'll see if anyone has any questions. Thank you. Can we just get some help with Mike's microphone?
There we go. I think I've managed to figure out how to turn the microphone on. Good morning, everyone. I haven't prepared a presentation for this morning. I think the report's relatively short and sharp and to the point. It is the third iteration of this report, and it's a summation of the military heritage activities that have taken place over the 2020 to 2021 financial year. I think I'll just open to questions, maybe, Madam Chair.
Thank you. A question from Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Michael. Just a question about under the next steps. You've got decision required regarding continuing the Dawn and Civic Anzac Day services. So I presume by that you mean whether or not to continue with 2 services or have 1 service. Is that a fair interpretation?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Yeah. So can you tell us how that decision is going to be processed and when we might be making it?
I I'm actually not sure about what
I
that
think
that step
the
would be.
Assistant Chief Executive would comment on that.
Okay.
Oh no, Luke McIndoe, Head of Partnerships, I think, no? Partnerships and Events? Events.
Hi, yeah, Luke McIndoe, Head of Events, officially, as the
And
title.
congratulations on that appointment,
Thank you.
Luke.
Yeah, so the decision on that will be part of the PND group process, and that will then go through the Armistice Day and Anzac Day organising committee in a joint decision of that committee.
Okay, so that won't be coming back to council to make that decision then?
That's not the intent at this stage.
Okay, thank you.
Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Luke. Would it be fair to say that budgets have been an issue, i.e. not enough budget for previously what we've done with Anzac and 2 services for Anzac and supporting the other cities' activities?
Yeah, we're working with the budget that has been set through the long-term plan process.
But it would be fair to say that that was chopped and hasn't been reinstated?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So I'll leave it to comment.
Thank you. Question online from Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple, if you'll allow me. On page 10, it talks about options for a broader heritage advisory panel, and I was wondering how things are going with that and what the thinking is around that at the moment.
We're currently preparing a report to come to council in November, so we've been looking across the country to see how those types of panels are put together and what options there may be, and there'll be a selection of options for councillors to look at, and we'll be providing recommendations for you regarding how that can be managed going forward. So that'll be coming to November at this stage.
Cool, thank you. And with the next steps and the things that we're looking at going forward, is there any focus on Maori Battalion and how those men were used and treated when they returned? Is there any focus on that in this coming year?
We are working with the Maori Battalion at the moment at an officer level around some of the aspirations around the existing building on Cuba Street, and there are some discussions underway around how some of those stories may be able to come out into the public realm, and there may be an opportunity through the Cuba Street redevelopment too to tell some of those stories. So it's early days in terms of, I guess, looking at opportunities, but there are conversations underway with the Maori Battalion around that and looking at different options.
Thank you. And just finally, when we are incorporating the military heritage theme across all our council projects and activities, are we getting context of what those events were in aid of? Or, you know, are we getting the full history, or is it more a focus on the people who served at the time?
I think it's difficult to answer that question. I probably couldn't give a firm response, Councillor.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Question online from Councillor Finlay.
Yes, with the Anzac Day situation, are we going to be the only city and town in the whole country that's going to have one service? Are we just going to turn our backs on all those people that have died in the keep, so we're speaking English and Maori? Are we just going to turn our backs on them?
Councillor, the question has been asked and answered. I think there's work to be done in that space, and nobody is suggesting that at this stage, so there's no need to answer that question. Thank you. Do you have anything else?
Comments.
Okay.
No, I'll wait for comments.
Thank you. Question online, Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, Michael and Luke, and congratulations, Luke, on your role. My question's on page 10, and looking at the further steps and next steps, looking at the reinstatement and installing the Memorial Park flagpole, just wondering when that will actually happen.
I'd probably need to get a response to you from infrastructure on that. It's something we can come back to.
Through the chair, my understanding is that the focus of the Memorial Park work is that we're working very much towards the Armistice Day opening. So everything should be done by then.
Thank you for that
So
comment.
we'll
That
be
was
up.
Sarah Sinclair online.
So what will be up
Sorry,
by then?
apologies. Yeah.
Thank you.
That is, as I understand it, that's the intention. Yes, Councillor Leone, through the chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions online. Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Luke and Michael. Just continuing on with the questions around the Anzac Day service, can you perhaps just give us some advice in terms of would it be beneficial for us to at least undertake some limited community engagement on that? It seems that it's quite a big step.
We do have an organising committee that does include relevant non-officers, so outside of council. So I mean, my advice is at the moment is that's the forum for the organising, and it does reach a wide range of voices that are relevant to that particular service.
Yeah, I suppose. But in recent years, there's been a renaissance in terms of public interest in those services. So I'm just trying to figure out whether or not it would be beneficial for us to actually have at least some limited community engagement on the topic.
Yeah, that's something we'll look into.
Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, gentlemen. Just following Councillor Finlay's kind of question, are we meeting this budget 100% from the council resources, or is there a chance to get something from the central government or Ministry of Defence for these services?
The support, external support provided to us is mainly through the Defence Force, and that's through support from their officers. At this stage, there's no other funding that comes into those events. It's primarily funded through council programs.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have 3 areas of questioning, I suppose, in about various parts of this report. So on a practical level, the Memorial Park redevelopment was referenced by Sarah in her comments opening for Armistice Day. Luke, I wondered if you would talk to us about what's the intention there.
Primarily, the event that's due to take just prior to Armistice Day is to launch the new splash pad. But due to the significance of the military heritage of that site, we will be incorporating some elements into that opening. So the military heritage of the space will be recognised at that event.
Okay, thank you. Second area, the line of questioning that's coming forward around the Anzac Day commemorations. So hearing what you're saying about using our Heritage Advisory Group and the Armistice and Anzac Day Organising Committee, both of which I sit on with representative groups, but do you think if there's any move away from status quo of 2 services in the city centre, that should be a political decision rather than a community decision?
It's something I personally have not considered. So I don't know if Cheryl has any thoughts on that.
I think that if council wish to have two services, I think that's a very appropriate decision for council to actually make, along with appropriate funding.
Thank you. So to follow up on that, there does seem to be an issue with the level of funding. Is officer advice that the level of funding currently available is not sufficient for two services ongoing?
It'd be more around what level those services will be delivered at. Yeah, I mean, you know, the level of funding kind of determines the elements you can include in those services. So you could deliver two services at the current funding, but there'd be elements that you would not be able to include in those two services.
Have we delivered those two services within the existing envelope of funding over the last couple of years?
No.
How much more funding has been required from other funds to top that up?
This year required approximately $10,000 extra.
Thank you. I see hands go up. I do have another area of question, but if this is following on, then I'll go to Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Luke. Just to be clear, is funding the only factor in deciding whether or not to have one or two services on Anzac Day? Is that I won't say the motivation, but is that the rationale behind that comment?
I don't believe so.
So what other factors are factoring into a possible decision to go to one service if it's not just funding, I suppose?
It'd be the intent of the organising committee.
Right. So is your understanding that the organising committee would prefer to only have one service?
I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to go back to the officer that sits on that committee, which isn't me at this stage.
Is anyone else able to give any?
I can speak to that as a member of that committee. It's certainly been a focus of discussion at that committee. The concern has been that whatever we do should be appropriately resourced, and that has been an ongoing point of discussion around the table, that we escalated those programmes to reflect the World War 100 theme of events. We expected greater public engagement in that space, and that's exactly what we got. What we then expected was that public engagement would leak away as we moved away from that particular focus of commemoration, and that hasn't happened. People still seem to be quite engaged, and particularly we see huge numbers at dawn service. The committee also recognises that the city centre events are not the only ones the city supports. There are events that happen in our outlying areas, in the villages, and we're also involved in the commemorations at Linton Army Camp as well. So it's more a question of taking a bigger picture view and a view of the funding. Is there an appetite for doing things differently? But the committee hasn't formed a view on that. It's more been a question that's been asked. And I suppose my question about whether that's a political decision is, I feel that is a political decision. I think the appropriate thing to do would be to seek a report back to enable officer comment and the community voice into a political decision on that subject.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Just further on this, and it probably jumps to a comment, but I've got another recommendation there to try and bring this to the table.
Thank you. Noted. We'll bring that further in comments. My final area of questioning was, I think, about the intent of this report. Mike, in your opening comments, said this is the third iteration. Elected members might remember that this report came out of a discussion around whether we would have a military heritage precinct formalised within the central city, and we decided against that, but instead brought forward this idea of a military heritage theme that will be expressed through the city. Mike, I wonder if you would have a comment about how successful we've been in doing that.
It's just checking to see. It is? It's on? You can hear me? Okay. I think it's really difficult to quantify that, actually, that question. I think there's been a lot of collaboration with the likes of the Defence Advisory Group, and there's a lot of discussions that go on with Joe and with a lot of our officers. there have been many conversations about how some of our infrastructure programs can deliver on military heritage. For example, there's obviously been a lot of discussion about Cuba Street in recent times, but also with Square Edge. I probably couldn't quantify, I guess, what success would be, but there have been ongoing conversations out of that recommendation around the military heritage precinct, and then looking to bring things into, more of an operational lens in terms of giving effect to military heritage outcomes. So, I can't really quantify that, Madam Chair.
Thank you. There are no further questions. Checking the screen now. Thank you, gentlemen. You can both take a seat. Now you're back up again later, and I will open that up for comments. If we look at the recommendation...
Madam Chair, do we not need to move something first?
I'm going to move. I'm just looking for the recommendation to appear. Thank you. The committee resolved the memorandum titled Military Heritage Update 2020-21 reported to Arts, Culture and Heritage on 29 September 2021 be received. I will move that. Look for a seconder. Councillor Barrett, thank you. In opening for comments, I would ask, I have an additional recommendation that I've given to the committee administrator, which just picks up on that point I was teasing out with the officer there. I think the intent of this report was, 3 years ago, genuinely to seek opportunities to tell our military heritage stories. But strongly within, certainly my thinking when I originally moved that recommendation, was the opportunities of storytelling in the built environment. And we seem to have been very successful in lots of other ways, but we haven't really taken hold of those opportunities in spaces like the Square East redevelopment, which we've seen. There's no storytelling there, and there's no opportunity for storytelling as currently developed. Cuba Street, the officer mentioned, that's long been a discussion point with Palmerston North Defence Heritage Advisory Group. That's a really significant area of military heritage there, with the old RSA linking through into the Maori Battalion Hall and the stories there, and obviously the really significant and important redevelopment of the arena, which did take the opportunity for storytelling across lots of our heritage. So I wanted to bring forward a recommendation here that would give a direction for future focus of this report, that the operational reporting on activities is interesting and all well and good, but doesn't really give effect to our strategic forward-looking intent, and the Mayor has signalled he's happy to second that. And I see he's got his hand up to comment. Just in other areas of focus from this report, I think there will be some comment about the Anzac Day need for a decision. And speaking from the Defence Heritage Advisory Group, I think the community who are involved in those decisions, Defence Heritage and the Armistice and Anzac Day Organising Committee, would welcome political direction in this space that would inform the budgets that officers have available to deliver those programmes. And I think from those committees, it'd be fair to say, if we haven't got the budget to deliver 2 services, then we shouldn't be expecting officers to deliver 2 services. So somehow we need to square that circle. And I look forward to your comments on that. And I will also note that I'm very much looking forward to the Memorial Day official reopening around the Armistice Day, which also lines up with Local History Week. And that will be a special moment for our heritage storytelling, as well as opening a splash pad, which is of particular joy to me. So I'll open for any other comments. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to acknowledge the report the officers brought forward. And also acknowledge the Palmerston North Defence Heritage Advisory Group. These are basically volunteers that work on behalf of the city with an area of passion and focus. And Joe, to you and your team, thank you for your service to the city. Look, military, this report, there's been quite a lot of activity actually, and it's interesting to see in this report, and I think any city would be quite proud of acknowledging the sacrifices that Defence Force and sector does for our city and our people. But it should be acknowledged, Palmerston North has a real special connection with the New Zealand Defence Force. It goes back well over a century. The city has 70-year-old charters. Only Auckland and ourselves have 2 big charters with our major defence bases, Linton Military Camp and RNZF Base Ohakea. That's special, you know. Other cities just don't have that. And it's our overall connection with the 7,000 plus personnel and families that are part of that sector. I'll leave the Anzac Day thing to a second comment, because I believe, and I'm hearing the feeling around the room, that we've got to give some direction there to the officers. But look, this report's good. There's been some great work. The report signals that, but I feel it's not embedded in some of our policy and work plan. I can recall one of our former planners, you know, just really pushing back on doing a bit of this work, and we couldn't get it over the line. And unfortunately, things like Cuba Street, Square East, if it's not embedded, there's no direction. It relies on individual officers or somebody to pick it up and do it. Arena was actually the working group that pulled that together. It wasn't embedded in any work plan or policy from council. So there needs to be some sort of direction or firm direction that we need to do this work. Otherwise, it'll just fall possibly on deaf ears. It's needed. You can see Cuba Street is really a military alley for our country, and it will, you know, it won't get acknowledged unless we give some firm direction. So I'd ask you to please support this recommendation. It really just, and to be fair to the officers, they need to understand what is in and what is out, and I think we need to put a bit of this in. So thank you. I'll leave my Anzac Day stuff to later.
Sorry, by later, do you mean you're going to have another comment?
I've got a recommendation.
Okay, so we'll deal with the recommendations that are on, then we'll come to the Mayor's additional recommendation. Councillor Johnson?
Could we just see the Mayor's additional recommendation? Because I may want to put one up myself if it's not what I'm thinking.
The Mayor's... That's what the Mayor is proposing at this stage.
That's, Madam Chair, that's what I was proposing and asking the officers that they'll bring back something back to us to how can they make that happen.
Okay. Well, so we're going to address this one later, are we, in comment?
It's on the screen now. Mr Mayor, do you want to speak to that?
Oh, look, okay, I will. I think it's really clear. It would be like going out for the parking discussion again if we said, are we going to dispense with a basically a century-old, it may not be a century, Joe will correct me, it's probably 80 years old tradition of a civic service. There's a real reason why that happens, and you know, the officers and maybe elected members need to understand the heritage of why we have a civic service. They're different audiences. It allows the service personnel at dawn to pay their respects. It's civic. It allows the community, the city, to pay its respects. Yes, we're getting 10 to 12,000 at dawn, but we're also getting 3 to 4,000 of a different audience at 9 a.m. Civic service, and that's where the city remembers and acknowledges the sacrifice. It's not a great deal of money, as the officers said. What has happened with COVID and everything else, we chopped some budgets and the money has not gone back in to service this properly. I would like the officers to look at what we can do. They come back, rather than jumping to put some more money in, let the officers come back and give us a report on that. But we've got to give them some direction.
Thank you. We do have some questions online, so I'll go to those, and if there are thoughts on additional wording for that recommendation, we can take that. Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Were you wanting questions or comments at this stage?
The officer asking if we can go to the ones that were tabled first, and we'll hold the Anzac conversation while we figure out what's going on there. So comments at this point on the recommendation in the officer's report that the report be received, and on the motion that I've spoken to, which is about military heritage update future focus. So any comments on that, Councillor Dingwall?
Yes. So I guess for me, I want to firstly acknowledge the officers for this report. It is difficult to do reports like this when I guess for me, I know that not everybody is completely supportive of military themes throughout everything. And so when I look at this, I fully acknowledge that we do need to recognise military history, and we do need to recognise sites of significance. Those sites exist and their history should be preserved, but I am cautious about when we get the context of what the different wars were actually in service of. There are some comments I could make about some of the wars, which I won't out of respect for some people. But of the 5 presentations that we've got planned in the agenda in this report, only one, which is Hiroshima Day, makes any concession to the innocent victims of war, the ones who weren't soldiers, the ones who, you know, and so I'm wondering about balance. Yes, we do need to have acknowledge the military theme that we've got, but I'm not seeing the balance of the conscientious objectors, the balance of the peacekeepers in that. I'm not seeing the focus that is outside of what's been proposed as I guess of the 3 proposed events, you've got the remembrance and, you know, rather than for me, I want the focus to be away from the victories and the loss and more of why those wars happened and what we can do to avoid those wars happening, and more focus on the peace and the victims and the conscientious objectors and the Maori Battalion. All of those other aspects of history, not just the focus on the war and service part. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think there are any further comments on those first 2 recommendations. Oh, Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to jump in the queue late to comment. Did want to thank the officers for the report and reflect a little bit on the journey over the last 3 years in terms of where this has gotten us. And I think it has been quite useful to bring this to our attention on a regular basis. It's given us an opportunity to reflect on, you know, what is appropriate, what we do and don't want to see in this space. And I think it's done a really good job of just keeping us aware of and tracking. And so from that perspective, I'm very welcoming of the next steps, including seeing what can be done in terms of a wider heritage advisory panel, because I think there are so many themes of valued heritage that today we don't actually do what we could and should in this city. And I think actually what we have here is an exemplar of something that has over time built up an awareness and a status and broadening the scope to look at the range of heritage within the community and city would be entirely appropriate. So look forward to that investigation of options in particular, and just wanted to thank the officers for the report.
Thank you. So for no further comments on those first 2, I will just exercise a right of reply to say that the description of the Heroes Walk for the Memorial Park redevelopment is obviously short in the papers. My understanding of that piece of work through the Defence Heritage Advisory Group is it doesn't just celebrate World War II volunteers and servicemen and women, but also looks at the wider history and is looking to provide an opportunity for non-combatants, conscientious objectors, for those stories to be captured there. And I think I'd say in an overarching comment for all of our military heritage activity, the theme that comes through all of that is lest we forget. Lest we forget. The reason we do these things is so that we remember and so that we learn the lessons of the past. And that might not be explicitly brought forward in the stories that we tell, but implicit in those activities is for the remembrance of the reasons why. And so I'd look to seek your support for those first two recommendations in that vein. And are we happy to take those two together? Okay. Over to you. So we will do that. Nobody's calling for a division, so we will just do that by raising hands and on the voices. All those in favour on those first two recommendations, can I see your hands or hear your aye? Thank you. Aye.
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 Against? Okay. Councillor Harpiter, did you vote there? We've lost the screen
Four
here.
in the box.
It's all in the box. It's in the chat box.
Yeah.
So 4 against, I didn't hear anything. Any abstentions? Carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody. And then let's move to that third recommendation that was moved by the Mayor. I think there's some discussion about getting some appropriate wording there. There was something in the chat box from the Deputy Mayor. So there might be some suggestions come for the wording, but some comments. Councillor Beattie, you wanted to... No? It wasn't Councillor Beattie, it was Cheryl Bryant. Sorry, I'm not getting the memo.
Thank you, councillors. It would be really helpful to have some clarity in terms of the recommendations, what you're expecting. At this stage, it's just determining to have two services. If the intent was to have a report back, what the report back was on. If it's about additional funding, then we can provide that advice direct to council at the next council meeting to ensure that we can actually continue planning, because we do need a lead in time around any particular planning.
Thank you, that's helpful. I think the Deputy Mayor, I'll go to you online. I think you had a comment in this particular regard.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. I was just going to suggest that we could tidy that wording up slightly by rephrasing it to say that the CE report back on resourcing required to ensure the city continues with 2 ANZAC services. That acknowledges, I guess, the Mayor's intent to confirm the direction of council, or the wishes of council, is that we have 2 services, but it also acknowledges the officer's request that additional resourcing will be required, and it sort of provides next steps to what the Mayor's intending to do. So if there's agreement from the Mayor, I think we could just amend the wording. Otherwise, if need be, I can put through a formal amendment.
The Mayor's signalling he agrees that. All I would like to add to that is to say 2 services in the central city, to recognise that we have many ANZAC services go on around our area that we support. So it's not just that we have 2 services. So it looks like that wording is being changed. Is that the end of your comment, Deputy Mayor?
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson, you have a comment.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So I guess the first thing to say is that Anzac Day is a particularly special day for everyone in New Zealand. Those who were born in New Zealand and those of us who are migrants. And I am a bit concerned about the way that we possibly would have gone to one service without any political commentary on it or decision making and any public consultation. And I'm not quite happy at the way that, and that's why the first thing I picked up on this report was that comment under next steps, decision required. So I would have preferred a more formal coming to council for decision making on this. I think that would have been much more appropriate. But anyway, here we are. So I think that the public expectation is of the 2 services on Anzac Day. As the Mayor's commented before, the services are different. They have different purposes. In terms of the civic service, that does allow particularly young people to get involved. We have all the schools, we have the scout troops and so on. I think that would be a huge loss to lose that. And because, you know, more people do attend the dawn service, that would probably be the one that would be lost, would be my thinking, if we were to lose one. So, I mean, if it's for the want of $10,000, quite frankly, I think we just, you know, accept that we have to put more money to this and approve the funding. So, I mean, this really is, I really feel that this is like a no-brainer. There's no way that people, I'm sure if we consulted that people would not want us to do one dawn service only. And so I'm very nervous at the thought that this could have happened sort of without coming to council. Very nervous, and I don't think that's appropriate. So there needs to be some sensitivity around what is an important decision for the city. And the potential loss of a civic service in the town, centre of the town, in front of the War Memorial on Anzac Day, that is a sensitive decision. And that is something for which the politicians need to carry the can. So anyway, I think that's probably enough. I support this. I support the two services. And yeah, I don't think we should be worried about $10,000 to do the service. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see anybody in the queue for comment. I want to say that I very much do support this, and I think I can speak for the Defence Heritage Advisory Group and the Armistice and Anzac Day Organising Committee when they say they would very much appreciate this having a level of political direction. Because I absolutely support what Councillor Johnson has said and the direction the Mayor has taken here. The decision to maintain status quo or to do something different is a political decision that requires appropriate funding. The situation we're in is a sign of our success in this space, that we amplified these events because of the particular commemorative environment that we were in, and our community has responded very positively to that opportunity. If we want to maintain that level of engagement, then the budgets need to line up with it. And I think a report back to Council as quickly as possible, and definitely by the year end, to enable officers to plan going into next year's Anzac Day services will be a very appropriate way of dealing with that. Mr. Mayor, do you need a right of reply there?
Oh, just very quickly, and just acknowledge some of the comments. Look, we've got to support this. I mean, and we've got to give the officers some direction and resource it properly. Just by way of to give you an understanding of perhaps where the community are, I attended the RSA AGM on Sunday on behalf of the city, and I just took a straw man's poll, and of course an audience which you would expect to support this, but they are ratepayers as well, and I did say that we probably would have to, there would be some extra resourcing needed, but it was 100% unanimous. And then one of the base commanders, who's a vice patron of the association, was there, and he commented to me, it would be extremely sad, for the sake of a little bit of money, that the city dropped the civic service. So I think that's going to give you a steer with the community. I'm a little bit disappointed that we've got to this stage too, like Councillor Johnson. The officers should have seen this coming. But anyway, we're here now, and we're going to give some direction, I hope. So please, show some leadership and support it. It really is just a little bit of extra funding, which was there originally and has been chopped back. So we're really just reinstating to what we had previously, for all the reasons the Chair said in the earlier WW100 program. So please support it.
Okay. So if we go to the recommendation on screen and check we've got that wording to a point that everybody is happy that it is fit for purpose, that the CE report back on resourcing required to ensure the city continues with 2 central city services for Anzac Day. Moved by the Mayor, seconded by Councillor Meehan. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Abstain? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll look to see that move on to the work schedule for Council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moving to the next item on our agenda, which is the 2021 Maintenance and Renewal Plans and Budgets for Cultural Facilities. This report presented by Bryce Hosking, Property Manager. Bryce, if I can invite you to come forward. Thank you.
Morena councillors, happy to take this report as read and answer any questions.
Thank you, Bryce. Short and sweet. I will open that for any questions. I had one. So in 2.4, you talk about working with the various tenants and CCOs. Have you had any comment, particularly from either of those groups, on this programme, or is this accepted and suitable?
Yep, this is fully accepted. We have regular meetings with them, and when forming the informing the 10-year plan as well, we definitely sought their advice and have formed this plan accordingly with them.
Okay, and just a further one on the fire safety upgrades indicated for Square Edge. I'm aware, elected members will be aware, that the apartment at Square Edge is currently not capable of being used as an apartment because it doesn't meet fire safety regulations. Will these fire safety upgrades deliver a usable apartment in the Square Edge building?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bryce, two questions. Just following on from the Chair's questions around Square Edge. What is required to be able to use that apartment facility?
Being a residential accommodation, that triggers a number of factors actually from a fire point of view. The list I don't have definitively right on me right now, but it is a number of things around egress. Sprinkler systems will be required, which they're not otherwise. And it basically completely changes the use of the facility from a building consent point of view. Considering we're looking to do work in there up until now, this matter probably should have been flagged a long time ago, and we've managed to get away with it for this long. In terms of the work that we are doing in there, it's things like replacing some doors with fire doors and the likes. Upgrading switchboards and things.
So if our CCO or our group over there wasn't honest and said we are using that as a workspace and you were none the wiser, they could still use that?
Whenever we look to do any kind of work that requires a building consent, that's when these kind of things get looked at, and this was the case in this situation.
So they were doing a building consent and it came up as a red flag.
Correct.
Okay.
I think, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, there has been no intention by Square Edge to try.
No. I didn't mean that. I just wanted to tease out how we're now discovering all this, and yet they've been using that facility like that for a number of, or over a decade, in a program around the artists in residence. Just the second question, Madam Chair, is around the Regent Theatre. So as you're aware, Bryce, we had a waterfall in one of the concerts there down one of the walls. Has all that been picked up?
Yes, it has. So that was actually caused from dead pigeons that actually had strategically all fallen in the wrong places, and as a result, water actually backed through. The initial feeling was it was actually a leak in the roof, but that was actually proven not to be the case.
Okay, so we're good there.
We're definitely good there, and we've put some measures in place to stop that from happening again.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and for your comments around Square Edge. Bryce, I just wanted to ask, we know that, for example, Te Manawa, Square Edge are earthquake-prone buildings, and there's decisions to be made about what happens in the long term there, I suppose. So in terms of these upgrades, are these things that are absolutely necessary at the moment? Because I see us putting a lot of money into buildings, but if down the track we've got earthquake issues, well, we know we have earthquake issues with those buildings. So how does that fit into the sort of bigger picture of the earthquake strengthening work that's going to be required, or the decision not to do it, if you know what I mean?
It's a great question. So there is definitely a balance there. So when we're looking at the 10-year plan, depending on when these facilities are scheduled to be upgraded, that there's definitely a bit of a balance between what we do and what we don't. Much like the Central Library, same sort of thing. You know, we if it's not scheduled to be seismically upgraded for 9-10 years, well then that means that there's a number of things that we will look to do in year 1 or 2, for instance, but the closer it gets to that deadline, there may be more of those things that you might choose not to. All of the work across that portfolio, including at Tamana and Square Edge, that kind of decision making has been made. In respect to the fire upgrades, that gets triggered anyway through the building consent. So quite often it's a much better strategy to be dealing with fire upgrades well in advance, and then that's one less thing to have to worry about when you are looking to do the strengthening work.
That's great, thank you. Going online to Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Bryce. Just looking at the buildings and the excuse me, and the investigative work that you've done, is there any buildings there that you've seen any work that that you can see? Sorry, that you can see that anything that's sort of shown up that is a red herring that you think, oh my goodness, this is going to cost us a lot more than what we thought it was going to cost in the budget?
No.
No, so there's nothing there that's showing up that's like a leaky roof or anything that's going to be a lot worse than you thought it was going to be?
There's always a possibility of things breaking or failing and having to deal with things in a reactive sense. But we've gone through, we've done some thorough condition assessments of the facility, understanding the different components in an effort to be able to put plans and to definitely take a much more preventative stance on these kind of things.
Thanks, Bryce.
Thank you. Back in the room, Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Bryce. First, a quick follow-up around where Councillor Harpeter was going. So those condition assessments, what sort of frequency are those done on?
Every 3 years as a standard practice, but also whenever our contractors are going in and doing any other work, we also have some expectations with them as well, where they're feeding back condition data in a more live sense. So the example I often use is if they're up on a roof repairing a hole and they notice that the guttering is also failing, then they actually report that to us and we can start to make some plans before it has failed.
Great, thank you. Interested what we're doing with these facilities in terms of, I guess, looking beyond just keeping the carpets up to date and the walls painted and that sort of stuff, particularly in terms of energy efficiency, heat sources, those sorts of things. Can you give us a sense of where those conversations might happen? Is that with the CCO? Is that happening within council? Is it not happening?
It definitely is happening, I can give you that assurance. We are having those conversations with the CCOs quite regularly. So, for instance, at the Globe, as part of the changing room, bathroom update, we're also replacing the old gas boiler with a new electric one, which is definitely much more efficient and will give them some significant savings. Things like LED lighting and whenever we can be getting any kind of heating, lighting, insulation, things like that. Those discussions are ongoing and definitely being planned for throughout the LTP.
So just to expand on it somewhat, thanks for that specific examples. Have we done any, I guess, scoping work to understand what would be potential if we wanted to achieve a very high level of energy efficiency at a whole of facility level, or is it more about we're replacing this specific aspect and we want to do that specific aspect in an energy efficient way?
The focus is probably more at a specific element level. There are some key things we can be changing. Lighting is a good one to talk about. We have a specific program around replacing lighting throughout all our facilities, and that's an easy one to be targeting. But there's some key elements such as heating and cooling, lighting, how we're doing boilers and things like that. And there's a number of those key specific things we can be targeting in the first instance. If we really wanted to be ramping that up and taking it to a next level, there would need to be some specific investigation work and planning around that, and that definitely hasn't been budgeted for currently.
Right, thanks for those clarifications. Finally, if I might, just to build on the lines of questioning around the let's say, former apartment in Square Edge, and perhaps future apartment, but has there been an assessment done then of whether it would be more tractable and cost-effective to try to find a solution within that building versus finding other places where an artist in residence might take up residence?
It actually changes the importance level of the building because you actually have someone permanently in there. So not only from a fire aspect, but also when we come to be doing any kind of seismic upgrades, that significantly changes that as well. So, look, is there a solution? Well, there's always there's always a solution, but really it comes down to what that actually looks like and the cost of doing that. Initial assessments, even from a fire aspect, that was going to add about another $300,000-400,000 to the fire upgrade alone, and that's not taking into account any of the other matters that might get triggered through that.
Thanks. I guess what I was trying to get to is whether we've had a look at whether there might be another building that is suited for, might already be a residence of other types that could be purposed towards an artist in residence type use, and be perhaps more cost effective than a comprehensive solution in that building.
There were none in the portfolio that I'm aware of.
I'll just comment at this point that there is a report on the future of the artist in residence scheme on our work schedule for next year, so there could well be an opportunity to explore that idea of where exactly our artist is in residence at that point.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Bryce.
Councillor Butt, did you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Bryce. My question is about 3.1 and 3.2. I can see some clear figures and set budget for all the items in 3.1, but is this 3.2 an open budget thing, or do we have a set budget for these items as well?
Apologies, I don't have the report in front of me, but 3.2 is the list of operational items, correct?
Yes.
So we have just over $1 million in our operational budget for the cultural facilities portfolio this financial year, and that covers things like reactive maintenance and preventative maintenance, amongst a few other things. So no, it's not a never-ending pot of money. However, it is one that we have every year to be adequately dealing with things.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair.
That concludes the questions. Thank you, Bryce, for speaking to your report. If we can look at the recommendation, can we get that on screen, Natalia, please? The committee resolved that the memorandum titled 2021-22 Maintenance and Renewal Plans and Budgets for Cultural Facilities presented to the Arts, Culture and Heritage Committee on 29 September 2021 be received for information, which I'm happy to move. We'll seek a seconder. Councillor Barrett, thank you. I'll open that for comment. I will start by saying, in regards to the question of the apartment at Square Edge, I want to be very clear that Square Edge was compliant until the point at which building code was triggered, at which point it was discovered that they wouldn't meet fire regulations going forward, and they immediately stopped that activity. Let's be very clear about that. This is not an unusual situation. Exactly the same thing happened at Keisha Birch. The elected members may or may not be aware there is an apartment within that facility which is no longer used for residential living because it doesn't meet current building requirements. That might also be something we want to look at in the future, but we've made the decision not to at the moment. On the point raised very usefully by Councillor Johnson about earthquake-prone buildings, as we're aware, Square Edge is earthquake-prone, but particularly when we talk about Square Edge being earthquake-prone, it's the buildings around the courtyard that are of particular concern, rather than the main building itself, which does have some issues, but not the main concern. At Te Manawa, the art gallery is the only building that isn't of earthquake concern, but is one of the buildings that is of concern in this report. That's the building which has minor roof repairs and maintenance and roof renewals. As things stand, the gallery is not fit for purpose for receiving travelling exhibitions. When we put in a bid to receive a travelling exhibition, an international exhibition, we have to put in a description of where those pieces will be housed. Because of the failures in the roof of the gallery, which means they can't guarantee that it's watertight, we don't get those exhibitions. That's an ongoing concern for Te Manawa in this space. So even recognising that earthquake prone will cause us to ask some questions about the programming of some of this work, if we intend to deliver business as usual, we have to keep our buildings up to a certain standard while we're making those decisions. And I think this report balances those tensions very well. So thank you to the officer for bringing that and for the ongoing work with our tenants and CCOs to agree this programme of work to make sure that the work is happening in an appropriate and timely manner. Thank you very much. Any further comments? Councillor Johnson.
Just for your information, the flat in Square Edge is currently being tenanted out to artists, and so it's not an empty space that's not doing anything. It's being used, but for, community artists as opposed to as a residential purpose. And I think, the question I asked around the earthquake strengthening is that we don't want to be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a few years before we have to make a decision about earthquake strengthening. So it is a balance, as the officer said, between work that's needed urgently, and what actually just not needs. We don't want to be spending money on stuff that then subsequently will be wasted. And so I think in terms of the flat and Square Edge, it's a very pragmatic decision around not using it for residents, and it has been divided up now into studios for artists, so it's being productive. Thank you.
Thank you for that. There are no further comments, so we will look to vote on that recommendation if we get the recommendation back on screen. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye or give me a wave.
Aye.
Aye.
Councillor Finlay is very in favour of that. You echoed a lot there. Against? Abstain? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving to our final report for this meeting, upgrade on the city's 150th celebration programme, and inviting back to the table Luke McIndoe, Head of Events and Partnerships. Thank you, Luke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I take the report as read. Just a quick update that's come about since this was authored. The proposed end-of-year variety show that was to be delivered by community members is not going to take place. The required funding wasn't able to be secured by the deadline that was set, and also current uncertainty around COVID levels has meant that the timeframes to get that delivered, we've had to, that's unfortunately been cancelled. But I welcome any questions.
Did I see a presentation pop up there?
Oh, sorry, we have a PowerPoint presentation. We've got a few photos from a couple of the events this year. So we'll just get you to flick through those. So we've got some images from our Explore Esplanade Day event where we had the Mayor held a cake cutting and community was invited to share with that, and we had a historian present a talk on the history of the Esplanade. I'll jump forward, next slide. So New Year's Eve, this kicked off our year. We utilised projection elements to project our 150th tohu after we hit the midnight, after the fireworks. So that kicked off the year. We'll go next slide. So some images there from our business dinner held at the Regent on Broadway. Next slide. And finally we the city one after this. City lighting projection projects. There's a couple of events that utilised the lighting projection. The one on the right was a seed-funded event delivered by community members at the Cathedral on Broadway Ave, just prior to the lockdown, to move to level 4. And final slide. Just a couple of images that have come through for our upcoming Monopoly Palmerston North edition, which is due for Christmas this year. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Luke. Can I go back to the City installations and lighting projects. The report talks about a proposed water feature for projection, awaiting parts for delivery. Have you got an update on that?
I do have an update on that. The parts arrived last week, and it is, I do believe, right now down in the square being tested. So that's now ready for deployment.
And when will we expect to see something fabulous
We
there?
have some elements planned for Local History Week, COVID level dependent.
Thank you. Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Luke. Thanks for all your work in the background with the stop-start 150th, which has been a little bit unfortunate, but it's the cards we've been dealt with, really. Just talking games, Monopoly, when will that arrive? Because there's a lot of excitement around that.
That's due to arrive at the end of November. We'll be doing a launch activation and promotion campaign that the officers will be backing.
Is there any opportunity of end of November is very tight for a window of sales for Christmas, which is, I'm sure is top of mind for selling them. Is there any opportunity that we can publicise beforehand to get almost some expectation or pre-sales?
Yeah, our marketing team is working on some collateral to get that out to some of the larger businesses throughout the community. He'll be able to secure pre-sales for that.
Great. And where's it being sold from?
Eyesight.
Okay, thank you.
Online, Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Luke, what was the total budget for the 150th event, and what was the total spend for the overall 150th program?
Total program was, I haven't got the exact amount in front of me, it was 120,000 program over 2 years. It was reduced to 75. So we had $75,000 to use. And the specific question, I assume, was for the dinner?
No, for the whole thing.
Program.
What have you
75,000 in the last financial year.
So was that including the money that you received in terms of sponsorship as well?
No, that was additional.
So what was the total, if we go back to the question, what was the total money that you had allocated for the program, including sponsorship? What was your total budget?
Apologies, I'll just do some quick sums.
I just thought in a final report, if this is the final report, we would see these kind of sums in the final report.
Just to comment while Luke is doing his maths, there is a wash-up report due next year which will have the final budgets in it. But Luke might be able to make an interim comment, which we won't hold you to for 100% accuracy, Luke, because you're doing sums on a piece of paper.
I will update you at a final report, but back of the envelope, sums was 150,000.
So $75,000 council budget.
150,000.
Yeah.
And we've spent 75. No?
No, we've spent all of it.
Spent all of it.
Okay. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Thank you.
No further questions. Thank you, Luke. You can step back. We'll go to the recommendation on screen. The committee resolved that the memorandum titled Update on the City's 150th Celebrations Programme presented to Arts, Culture and Heritage Committee on 29 September 2021 be received for information, which I will move. I will look for a seconder. Councillor Hancock, thank you. And open that for any comments. I'll start. I think our city's 150th celebrations will go down in history as the 150th celebrations that COVID nearly killed, but we have fought through manfully. And I think the strength of this programme has been in those community events funded through the SEED programme. Because they were smaller and more nimble, we've been able to go ahead largely with some juggling around timing because of the COVID alert level changing, but we've been able largely to deliver. A couple of unfortunate large-scale events dropping because of the changes. So at the start of the year, the Arena reopening was lost. At the end of the year, the variety show, which we're hopeful of delivering, just isn't going to work in this environment. But even losing those things, we've delivered what I feel has been a very successful programme that's in some ways captured the imagination of the community. I think we'll continue to build on that with the launch of our Monopoly Palmerston North edition. And I, for one, am delighted to see that because it entirely sorts my Christmas present problems. I'm just hoping to have it in time to be able to get it posted to the UK. So can I have the pre-order form, please, Luke? I think that's all I wanted to say on that. Thank you to Luke and the officers who've worked very hard with our community to deliver these events. And as mentioned in comments, we look forward to that wash-up report coming to this committee early next year, where we'll be able to reflect properly on not just how council funds were spent, but on the substantial community funding that came in to support this programme. Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Luke, for your report. And I too just want to acknowledge the 150th committee, especially Luke and his team, but also councillors, yourself included, Chair, and Councillor Harpiter as well. It has been a stop-start, and we'll look back and think, wow, we've tried hard to do this and had quite a lot of barriers with COVID and other things put in front of us. But I too want to acknowledge some of the partners that came on board. We had to get some extra funding to make things happen, and the three city partners who have long-standing roots in the city and are headquartered in the city, FMG, Higgins and Toyota New Zealand, who stumped up over 30,000 between them. So that was great because it meant we could do some of these extra things. It was good to see some of the photos too. Thank you, Luke, for putting that up, because sometimes we actually forget what has happened during the year. You know, the start of the year, which, you know, the square Te Marae o Hine is always a great family event, community event. We had the business event at the Regent, the community event with Esplanade Day, again around families. We couldn't get Arena over the line, and that wasn't because of COVID, but weather got in the way. And the city installations around the lighting, I think that's a great legacy thing as well. We'll be able to use that ongoing for different type events, and great to see it being used at Matariki down on the river as well. The big winner, and we fought pretty hard as elected members on this, was around that community event seed fund, and we managed to get 28,000 across the line for different community events. And they were nimble, and they've been able to continue. Yes, they've been disrupted as well, but with the smaller numbers and being more volunteer orientated, they've been able to get over the line. I too have some real excitement around the board game. We'll be the second city in New Zealand, and I think one of about 8 in Australasia to have our own edition of the Monopoly game. So I do hope that you all fill your Christmas stockings with it, and I do think we need to get on to those pre-sales, because end of November will be upon us pretty quickly. Also, just as we round out, we did try to get another community event across the line with the variety concert, and I think at the end of the day we were beaten just by circumstances, and it's a bit sad that we couldn't fill the Regent with community and a community event for the wider city. But look, there is an opportunity of a tree planting opportunity with schools, and we're looking at some external funding and a much smaller event where all councillors can be involved around our 40 plus schools throughout the city and planting a tree to remember our beginnings. So let's hope we can get that across the line. Again, thanks to the support of elected members that enabled a fund to basically make this 150th program get ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are no further comments, so we will go to the recommendation on screen. And look, the committee resolved that the memorandum titled Update on the City's 150th Celebrations Programme presented to the Arts, Culture and Heritage Committee on 29 September be received for information. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
Aye.
Against? Abstain? Carried unanimously. Nō reira, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, e ngā mana e ngā reo, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you all. That concludes our extraordinary meeting. Mr Mayor, to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillors, we'll have a break, and to the officers, we'll look to do our next series of briefings if we regather here, and for those online at 10:35. Oh, we're not bringing people on forward. Oh, okay, all right. Sorry, I didn't get the memo.